getting word of multiple fires and injuries in Ukraine's capital following the latest round of Russian strikes on Kyiv. Officials say at least one person was killed and 9 others injured in the bombardment early Friday. Heating systems and infrastructure were damaged in several parts of the city. CNN crews on the ground described the explosions as loud and intense. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia may have used ballistic missiles in the attack. We'll keep an eye on the story and bring you the latest. Meanwhile, political correctness was out the window on Thursday as Ukraine's president spoke about his Russian counterpart. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed a European Council meeting in Brussels asking for more air defense systems to protect Ukraine's energy infrastructure. He also responded to an idea floated by Russian President Vladimir Putin during his annual press conference, suggesting it would be interesting to see Ukraine's air defenses take on Russia's new Oreshnik ballistic missile. On a response on social media, Zelensky posted a video of the conference and called the Russian leader a, quote, dumbass in the text above it. And his verbal response was no more flattering. Listen to this.
He says that we will strike somewhere in Kyiv, for example, with the Oreshnik, our new bomb, and let them put up air defenses. And let's see what happens. Do you think this is an adequate person? Just a scumbag.
Now, Putin, in his press conference, talked about the war in Ukraine and a possible meeting with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who's expected to push for peace talks. But as Brian Todd reports, the Russian leader isn't putting his cards on the table yet.
In the tightly choreographed, celebrated ritual that's become his year-end news conference, the 72-year-old Russian president spoke about the possibility of meeting with President-elect Donald Trump after Trump takes office.
I don't know when we'll meet because he hasn't said anything about it. I haven't spoken to him at all in over 4 years. Of course, I'm ready for this at any time, and I will be ready for a meeting if he wants it.
Vladimir Putin's claim that he hasn't spoken with Trump in more than 4 years contradicts reporting by journalist Bob Woodward that the two men have had as many as 7 conversations since 2021. Trump has also denied having multiple calls with Putin since leaving office. But Trump told CNN last May he could end Russia's war on Ukraine within 24 hours, a promise he repeated throughout the 2024 campaign, though offering few specifics.
We'll be talking to President Putin, and we'll be talking to the representatives, Zelensky and representatives from Ukraine. We got to stop it. It's carnage.
One analyst says Putin is being ultra careful when publicly discussing a potential meeting with Trump.
He says, yes, I'm open to discussing, etc., but he doesn't really get specific. And I think that is because he doesn't know exactly what Trump is going to propose.
At the news conference in Moscow Thursday, Putin put a positive spin on his war in Ukraine, insisting Russian forces will push the Ukrainian army out of the southern Russian region of Kursk, where it's been since August.
The guys are fighting. There's a battle going on right now, and serious battles. It's unclear why. There is no military sense in the Ukrainian armed forces entering the Kursk region, or holding on there now as they're doing, throwing their best units there to be slaughtered.
Trump has said the Biden administration's decision to allow Ukraine to hit targets deep inside Russia with American-made missiles could escalate the war, and he again lambasted that move this week.
Certainly not just weeks before I take over. Why would they do that without asking me what I thought? I thought it was a very stupid thing to do.
But one analyst says this.
I think it strengthens Donald Trump's hand as he enters office because he will have a Ukraine that continues to have a bargaining chip, a Ukraine that can potentially pressure the Russian president.
At the Moscow news conference, during the entire 4.5 hours of it, Vladimir Putin never spoke about and was never asked about the thousands of North Korean troops fighting alongside the Russians in the Kursk region. And there may be good reason for Putin's omission. In recent days, U.S. and South Korean officials have told CNN the North Koreans have suffered hundreds of casualties there, including about 100 believed to have been killed. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Right, let's dig deeper into Mr. Putin's statements at his press conference. For that, we're joined from Washington by CNN military analyst and retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Colonel, thank you so much for being with us. Always good to see you. So, Vladimir Putin, we heard Matthew Chance outline there that he essentially said in his annual address that he was ready to compromise, that he was willing to have possible talks with Donald Trump. Just walk us through what that actually looks like, because if Putin is willing to negotiate, Can the US, can the Ukrainians actually trust that the Russians are actually going to stick to their side of any kind of ceasefire agreement?
Well, the short answer to that, Zain, is they cannot. I thought it was very interesting that you mentioned that he would be willing to speak to Trump, but not mentioning Zelensky at all. And of course, that fits with the Russian narrative that Ukraine is not worthy of being a country. It is not worthy of being, in their view, of being an independent state. So this fits the narrative. And if the United States makes the mistake of conducting business about Ukraine without the Ukrainians, then that would be not only a significant mistake, but it would be a very detrimental blow to the Ukrainian war effort, both diplomatically and militarily. So the way this would work is if the Russians decided that they were in enough of a position of strength to negotiate a peace or a ceasefire of some type, they would probably try to do it alone with the United States. The United States should not agree to that. They should insist that the Ukrainians be part of any deal and of any negotiation, and that would be, I think, a critical factor, and that might even stop the negotiations from happening, at least at this particular point in time.
I mean, you mentioned that any kind of US brokered deal would obviously be a mistake. I mean, obviously it would be a huge blow to Zelensky. I mean, they've been fighting for 2 years now, and for that to essentially go to waste would be, devastating for the Ukrainians. My question to you, though, is what message, I think, equally as important, does that send to the rest of Europe? I mean, the former Soviet republics that, a lot of people are worried could be next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially the Baltic states, Poland, any of those areas would potentially be at risk. And what it would mean for the Europeans is that they would absolutely have to up the ante when it comes to their own defenses. Many countries, the Baltics and Poland specifically, have increased their defense budgets considerably. NATO has more members now with the addition of Finland and Sweden. Finland, of course, having a large, long border with the Russians, and that would be, I think, a critical element. So the Europeans would potentially have to move troops closer to the front lines with the Russians. They are considering putting troops in Ukraine after a ceasefire deal is reached, but the problem is how to get to that particular point. And the Europeans really don't have, at the moment, the diplomatic muscle to, by themselves, broker a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And that therein, I think, lies the crux of the problem. The Europeans are dependent on the United States, both diplomatically and militarily, at the present time, and they need to find a way to get beyond that particular point and make sure that they can safeguard their eastern borders. And by safeguarding their eastern borders, that means making sure that Ukraine stays a free and independent country.
And just in terms of the North Koreans, I mean, the North Koreans, a lot of them are going home in body bags. And President Zelensky did say, listen, there is absolutely no reason why North Korean soldiers should be willing to fight for and die for Vladimir Putin, especially because this war is so unnecessary. Just walk us through what the North Koreans specifically have gotten out of this relationship.
Certainly the individual soldiers who are fighting and dying for this cause, however you might want to term it, they are not getting anything out of it except for military training. Now, on the strategic level, the North Koreans are most likely getting all kinds of data from the Russians. They're getting data that will help them with their missile programs, potentially also for their nuclear program. They are getting aid from the Russians, and in essence, the North Koreans are joining in a kind of a partnership, not only with Russia, but also with China and distantly with Iran, that is basically designed to circumvent Western sanctions that are directed against Russia North Korea and Iran. And so those efforts are at a strategic level very important for the North Koreans because they need every possible means to gain things like foreign exchange, foreign technologies, and those technologies would include the ability to target U.S. military installations in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as, of course, South Korean installations and South Korean infrastructure.
Right, Colonel Cedric Leighton, live for us there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.